In many parts of the country, women propelled the Democrats' success in the midterm elections, and Michigan was no different. The state saw women candidates sweep statewide offices at the top of the ticket, flipping 2 U.S. House seats, winning both seats on the state Supreme Court, and Democratic U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow won re-election to a 4th term. She's now written a new op-ed for the New York Times in which she attributes the success to highly qualified candidates rather than the novelty of an all-female slate. And Senator Stabenow joins us now. Good morning. Congratulations. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Mika. I knew you would agree. And, first I have to say this was historic in so many ways. We had the largest voter turnout for a non-presidential year in 50 years. So no question people came out. But as I wrote in the op-ed, what I think is historic and is taking us the next step is that we had a woman win for governor, a woman win for attorney general, woman win for secretary of state. I won re-election, and that wasn't the headline. The headline was these great people won, but it wasn't this novelty. There wasn't a debate on how many women can you have at the top of the ticket, how many women can you have at the top of state government. And I remember when we had those debates, and as you know, we used to have those discussions regularly. So we've taken the next step.
Yeah, no, it's great on so many levels. But Trump did win your state 2 years ago. So was this somewhat of a reaction? Can he win there again?
Well, it's interesting. Donald Trump won Michigan by a little over 10,000 votes. I won re-election by 268,000 votes. And it was very interesting in the city of Detroit. He won 6% of the voters in Detroit. My opponent won a little less than 5%, even though he's African American. But he embraced Trump. He said he was with him 2,000%, and he was widely rejected for standing so close to Donald Trump. So we're still a very divided state, like every other state, no question about it. But there was a wide rejection of the divisiveness, the bigotry, the racism. People just want us to work together and get things done. And that's what I'm so excited about in Michigan. We have a group of folks that are competent, qualified, and ready to go to work.
Wow. Well, so Debbie, what was the difference between 2016 and 2018? What do you think made Michigan swing back blue?
I think there were two things, Joe. First of all, we had much higher voter turnout. So we had over 1 million more people show up, not all Democrats, but certainly many more Democrats than Republicans. So people showed up. And the second thing was they gave very strong messages. They're sick of the divisiveness and the fear-mongering and so on. And they want us to get things done. And they also very much reject the way this president is constantly dividing people. And so they want to get things done. I mean, it's no joke. I mean, health care for people is personal. It's not political. And they took it very personally, the effort to take away their health care, to stop covering pre-existing conditions. It wasn't rhetoric. And so, we're in Michigan. We are a very practical bunch in the Midwest. And folks just want you to work together, put your head down, get things done. And they really reject the way he's pitting people against each other and causing the inability to get things done that they want to see done.
So moving forward then with the goal of putting your head down, working together, and getting things done, what is the pathway forward for a Republican Senate and a Democratic House to find common ground in health care and get something done that actually protects people not only in Michigan but across the country?
Well, Joe, there is a way to come together on common ground. I mean, the highest cost driver in healthcare is prescription drugs. The president has said he wants to do something about it. Actually, right before the election, Susan Collins and I passed a two-bill package signed by the president to at least allow pharmacists to tell you what the best price is at the counter. They were being banned from doing that in many cases. So there's a way to come together around prescription drugs. the best thing would be to let Medicare negotiate the best price. But we know that the pharmaceutical lobby certainly is opposed to that. I also think there's common ground on infrastructure. This is something that everybody cares about: roads, bridges, water, sewer systems, high-speed internet in rural areas. And if I were advising the president, I would say you need to go back to some discussions with us. The Senate Democrats put a bill on the a proposal on the president's desk the very first month he was elected on infrastructure, and said, let's work together on this. I think there's certainly interest in doing that. So I'll continue to work across the aisle, as I do in the Senate, to get things done. Our side wants to govern. We actually want to work together to be able to do things, and the president's going to decide what approach he's going to take. Does he actually want to get things done, or continue to use the divisive rhetoric that he's used so far?
Senator Debbie Stabenow, thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.